In this video, we'll explore the fundamentals of working in Adobe Animate. So when you launch Animate, you'll find yourself at this screen where you can start a new file fast, and sometimes other things show up here that Adobe wants you to take note of. Notice that we have our home area here, and we can open or create a new file. So I'm going to go ahead and click New File. And we get to the New Document dialog. Inside of here, you can find different categories for things like character animation, social media, advertisements, and some other things. What I'm going to do is choose a preset from social. And let's just do a simple HD 1280 by 720. And you can always change these details on the side if you wish. Now, inside of Animate, one of the really important things to set up is your frame rate. So when you decide what your frame rate should be, that's going to determine, of course, how many frames you have to deal with every second of animation. So if we set our frame rate at 30, it means we're going to have to deal with 30 individual frames for every second. And that's really important with Animate. For platform type, you can choose ActionScript or HTML5 Canvas. And really the differences here is that ActionScript is native to Animate, and HTML5 Canvas will export for HTML, JavaScript, and so on. So it depends on what your target platform is. I would say if you're doing mostly animation, that ActionScript is what you want to choose. It's a better experience, and you get access to a lot more features. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Create here. And then we are inside of our content. Now, if we have a quick tour of the interface, we have our document right here. And notice above the document window, we're at 100% right now. I like to choose Fit in Window for this. And then we can see the stage right in the middle. The stage right now is showing up as white. Notice we have a Properties panel here, and this will reveal the properties for whatever you currently have selected. If nothing's selected, we see our document properties. And here we can find our publish settings, document settings, and so on. So if I wanted to change my stage color, I can just click this and pick a different color. So maybe this blue color here. It's a bit less blinding. We can also change our FPS settings. That is our frame rate. FPS stands for frames per second. And if we look at the bottom here, we can see we have a timeline. And very similar to Adobe After Effects, the timeline consists of layers. And you have your playhead here. And depending on how many frames you have, how much content across your timeline, it's going to depend upon, or determine rather, how long your particular animation is. And we can see here, we only have a single frame. By default, you only have one frame active, and the playhead is right here, but we can't move it around since we only have that single frame. Looking over to the left, we have all sorts of different tools. Here are our selection and transform tools up here. And then we've also got some brush tools, eraser tool, some basic shapes, so rectangles and ovals and so forth. We have our line tool, the ubiquitous pen tool, our text tool for creating text, and then paint bucket and ink bottle. The difference between these two is that paint bucket works with the fill of your content, whereas ink bottle works with the stroke. We have an eyedropper, and finally, the asset warp tool here. Down below, we can always edit the toolbar. So if there are particular tools we need, we can drag them over. And we have our fill and stroke colors. So this works a bit differently than some other applications. We do have fill and stroke here. It's not like Photoshop where it's foreground color and background color or anything like that. So let's actually draw something and do some basic animation. So if I choose my rectangle tool, let's keep it real simple. I can look over to my properties, and the properties is going to show the properties for the tool, the selected object, the selected frame, or the document itself. So notice, because I have a tool selected, tool shows up as highlighted, but I can always switch back to my document properties if I want to. Back to tool, let's change the fill and the stroke. So for the fill, I'm going to make it this orange color. And for the stroke, let's choose black. And of course, you can type in a hex code up here. You can also adjust the alpha or create a custom color from the color wheel here. So, but we want black. And you can make determinations around stroke size and style. So style, you've got some like ragged things, stippled, dashed. And then for width, this works very similar to Adobe Illustrator in that you have different width profiles. And of course, you have some other things down here too that are a bit more advanced. So with these settings and with my rectangle selected, I'm just going to click and drag to create a little rectangle. Now, similar to other applications, if I hold down my Shift key, it will be a 1-to-1 ratio, thereby creating a square. Now, once I have this created and I've released my mouse button, I can click on my selection tool. And a thing to know about basic shapes inside of Animate is that you can actually select and move your fill and your stroke independently. So I'm going to do a Command or Control Z to undo that. If you want to move them both at once, you can either double click and you can see they're both selected now, or you can just draw a selection rectangle around them. Very similar to the direct selection tool that you'll find in Illustrator and InDesign. So if we choose this, of course, we can manipulate the different anchor points that we have here and create all new shapes. All right, but what I want to do is I want to go ahead and make an animation here. And there are many ways to do it inside of Animate. Animate is a more traditional frame-by-frame animation tool. So I can go in here and add new frames. So for instance, this is my Insert Keyframe button. So if I click on that, it's going to create a new keyframe and it's going to duplicate the contents that I already have inside of that previous keyframe. So if I double click to select everything and just shift that over a little bit, we now have frame by frame animation here. So I could insert another keyframe there. It duplicates my content. And I can do this as much as I want in order to get a little piece of animation here. So that is a more tedious way of doing things for simple stuff like this. Of course, if you're doing frame by frame animation, you're probably working with more complex drawings than just a square. But if you have something simple like a square or even imported media, you can always go out to another frame, let's say frame 50 here. And if I insert a new keyframe now, you can see we have a keyframe at frame 4, and then we have one at frame 50, where we can then shift this over to where we want it to end up. So I'm going to put it on the other side of the screen. And now if I scrub, we can see our frame by frames going, but then this area, it's just immovable until we get to the last frame. Of course, that's because the last frame is the only place that we made a change. What we need to do is create an in-between animation from the keyframe at frame 4 to the last keyframe at frame 50. And to do that, all you need to do is select any number of frames in that frame span between the two keyframes. And what you would do is going up here, you can create a shape tween. Notice there are 3 types of tweens. Classic tweens and motion tweens are both used only on symbol instances. And we're not getting into that right now. So we want to choose shape tween. And there we go. We get an orange background and an arrow indicating that there's a tween here. So if I play this back now, we start out with our frame by frame animation, and then it slides into this very linear animation for our tween. So if we want to adjust the way that this tween works, we can select any of the frames that make up the tween. And if we look in our properties panel, we're now in our frame properties, and we can see we have a section all about tweening. We can remove our tween from here, but we can also change our easing effects. So if I click on classic ease, we can see this is a very linear ease. So it's a straight line. That's going to make things basically in the tween, the square will move an equal amount visually across each and every frame. It's very robotic and stiff. However, if I choose something like ease out, notice we have a number of different presets for ease out here, and I can put something very severe or maybe not so much. Maybe I'll do a quart. And what you have to do, you might think that this is applied now, but it is not. You have to actually double click it to apply. And if we view this now, we can see it slows down quite a bit. So we get that physicality to our tween. Now, another thing we can do, of course, is add in new layers. An important thing to know when working with Animate is that you should always have any content that's in motion, that's being tweened, always have that in its own separate layer, or else things are going to get weird. So for layer 2 here, I'm going to go ahead and create a different shape, maybe an oval. And I'll change my fill to something like dark red. And we'll create a little oval on this side. And then we're going to just go right into a tween here. So I'm going to insert a new keyframe at the very end at frame 50. And then selecting any of the frames between, once again, let's create a shape tween here. And before we see this in effect, of course, we have to make some change. So I can shift this down here, but I can do more than that. So that's changing the position. I can also adjust its transform with the transform tool here. And I could change its color if I wish. So let's make it, I don't know, green. So now if we play this back, we can see that we get all these different transforms, and we've got this parallax animation of things going in divergent ways. When you want to actually publish this, there's a couple of ways to do it. There's a quick share and publish here, which is probably the easiest way. So if I say publish, we can choose to publish an MP4 video or an animated GIF, and we hit publish. If you choose a video, it will open up Adobe Media Encoder, and it will use that to publish the video. I'm just going to cancel it. There's a lot more to Adobe Animate, but I feel that this is a pretty good introduction to some of the fundamentals.